This is the Workplace Ninja podcast, coming to you live from our summit in Baden with highlights, insights, and interviews.
All good? All good, okay. So thank you everybody. Hopefully you guys can hear me. If you can't, feel free to just let me know. But Samit Halvadia, I'm co-founder and CTO of Rimo3. And today I'm excited to be here. It's our first time at the Workplace Ninja event. And it's been great getting another perspective outside of just the EUC community around the endpoint management as people are starting their migrations to modern. And that's really kind of what we're going to talk about today. And I know it's going to be quite a technical session. I'm going to go into the demo of the software and give you guys some insights into what we do for a living. But the reality is, when we start talking to our customers and partners today, they're going through some type of transformation. And back in the old days, back in the AppDNA, Windows XP to Windows 7, it was a single-threaded migration going from one OS to another. And all you had to worry about is, will it work in a 64-bit environment? Can I deprecate my 16-bit components? And that was really it. And what we found now is that there's multi-threaded migrations happening on a very regular basis, where you'll have a budgeted line item like, I'm moving from Windows 10 to Windows 11, I'm moving from Citrix on-prem to Citrix hybrid, or I'm moving to AVD, I'm moving to Windows 365 and exploring whether or not this is a persistent environment that works financially for me, or I just want to take advantage of moving off of Config Manager and move more of my workloads, because if I can get my apps into Intune, they could sit in WPN, they could be part of the enterprise app store that you guys started seeing today that's curated. And ultimately, what we want to do is we want to take your versions of your applications that you've accrued over the last 25 years sitting in SCCM and help you with that migration to modern. And along the way, we'll answer a lot of questions like, will it work in Windows 11? Is this something that can work as an MSIX? Is this something that can work in multi-session for AVD? And the thing to keep in mind for us is everything that we've built has been focused around being as frictionless as possible, meaning there's new levels of automation and orchestration available to us where we don't have to do the boring stuff. We don't have to spin up a VM, get an end user to sit down in the seat, test the application, package the application, then hand it off through a certification process, and ultimately take 4 weeks to deploy a single application. The goal here is, let me understand the construct of your application by leveraging automation, then let me understand the expected behavior of your application, leveraging automation, and then tell you what the expected behavior will look like in your desired workspace, in your desired environment, leveraging automation. So the way that we do that is by actually going through the process of looking inside of SCCM and pulling all of your application and metadata out of it. I'll move back so I don't do any of that feedback. But the idea is, if I can understand your applications, I can take you through this process of onboarding the applications and ultimately discovering what they're meant to do, so that I can actually learn about the applications, how they're supposed to behave, and then test them to make sure that they'll work in my net new environment before I actually do the deployment. So everything that we're looking to do is prior to deployment, right? This should be completely automated, and before you click go, you should know the impact of change that you're gonna have in that environment. And once you've finished your digital transformation, as if that's possible, because I don't think that anyone's ever done with their true digital transformations to modern, you are still going to be dealing with regular change management and impact analysis, new cumulative updates, right? Windows Update for Business, Azure deployments, things that are happening in the application versions, new versions of the application, the hardening that you're doing to your OS around new GPOs and configuration policies. These are all environmental variables that could theoretically impact the functionality of these applications. So what we want to be able to do is help you automate the migration by actually going through a data-driven approach and understanding the impact of change. And then once you get to post-migration, we really want to focus on, great, now that change is going to be coming on a monthly, weekly, daily basis, what's the impact of that change to your application performance before you ever deploy it? So if I look at what I'm about to show you in the demo, the migration to modern is actually a multi-threaded migration. And the first thing that we start out with is taking your artifacts out of Config Manager. How many people are using Config Manager right now to deploy applications? Nearly everyone. So if you look in there, when people start their Windows 11 migration planning, the first thing they do is, I don't know what apps I have. I don't know what apps I need to move. So when we go into Config Manager, the first thing we want to do is pull all the artifacts that are being deployed inside of Config Manager and help you determine what's a task sequence, what are just 4 GPO registry changes that are being made versus what's really an application. It could be PowerShell deploy scripts, it could be MSIs, it could be app-v packages. It doesn't matter. As long as there's conditional logic and a silent installation, which you're probably using if you're deploying via Config Manager, we want to pull all of those artifacts in, and we're able to do that in about 30 seconds in application. So once we actually pull in the application, the next thing that we need to do is understand the application. This goes back to the construct that I'm talking about, where I can now say, just because I've pulled in an artifact, Acrobat Reader might not be Acrobat Reader. Chrome.msi might not be a web browser. Someone could have gone through a packaging process and changed it. And that's typically what happens. So what we do is we take those artifacts and we actually install them in your known environment to make sure that we understand what's being laid down. What are the dependencies? What's the conditional logic? What's the prerequisites? What are the post-installation instructions that need to be executed on run once? So we're able to pull all that data out, and after we go through that automated discovery, what you have is you have a skeleton that shows you the construct of your application. So I'm going to show you one where Acrobat Reader test is not actually Acrobat Reader. There's distiller in there. There's also licensing in there. There's also full Acrobat. So what it really gives you is an understanding of what each of those SCCM artifacts are, so you can start figuring out what to rationalize versus what not to rationalize. Now, once we understand the construct of your application, we have to understand the expected behavior of our application. So if you're running something on a Windows 10 build that's on a physical endpoint, we're going to test that application after we've discovered it and execute all the shortcuts inside of that application on your known build, so we know that this is the expected behavior. This is training our testing model to basically say Acrobat Reader on Windows 10 has these 17 entry points. This is the expected response from each of those entry points because we know it works in my Windows 10 build. Once we get to that point, we now understand the expected behavior. So this whole process here is called onboarding, and it takes about 7 minutes per application. And you can do that across multiple applications in parallel as long as you're willing to spin up VMs to do this work. So at the end of onboarding, at the end of 7 minutes per application, what we've done is we've understood the artifact in SCCM, then we've understood the construct of the application, then we understand the expected behavior of the application. So this is all relevant data that we've gotten through automation and by actually executing your application. Now comes the transformation value, where you're able to come in and say, great, but it's not a single threaded transformation anymore. I want to see my options for Windows 11. Here are my 12 builds I want to test against. Here are 3 Windows 365 builds. Here's 7 AVD builds. Here's 2 Citrix builds. Test it against all 11 of these. Tell me what's going to work and what's not going to work. And because we've trained our model to understand what the expected behavior is, whenever there's a deviation from expected behavior, we capture it in a video, we capture it in screenshots, and give you the results to say, green, it will work on your Windows 11 builds, 7 out of 12. Red, it will not work on your Citrix build. Green, it will work in your AVD build, but only in single session, not in multi-session. Green, it will work in your Windows 365 builds with your configuration policy applied to it. So what you're getting here is you're basically getting a roadmap that tells you that if it passes, you can take those applications and deploy them into Intune, export them into Intune, export them into whatever management plane. If you're using Liquid, Smart Icons, or Store, use it there via the API, and you're able to deploy those applications. So what you've done in roughly 20 minutes is figured out, can this application migrate from my current state to my desired state? Now, what's interesting about this is in the event of a failure, you've got the video to go back and review and figure out what failed so that you can take that to the application owner and say, only these need to be fixed. So here's the video, please fix it, add the right middleware, add the right prerequisites, change to these DLLs, whatever it might be. Take that information, grab it, fix it, and run it through the pipeline completely again. And when it does pass, you now have the option to say, yes, I want to deploy it, or you could say, I'm actually looking at MSIX, AppVols, I'm looking at Intune Win wrapped applications. You now have the ability to determine whether these applications are good candidates for a modern application format. Now, if it's a good candidate for MSIX, we'll go ahead and package it and convert it using the CLI utility that Microsoft provides and orchestrate that entire process. If you want AppVols, we use their app capture technology to create AppVols packages, VHDs, VMBKs, and the JSON files. Intune Win wrapped, no problem. You know it works on your Windows 11 build. We can put it in an Intune Win wrapper and ultimately allow you to export it to Intune Win. But once we actually do the conversions and captures, we take those packages and make sure that the new versions of the packages also work on your desired workspace. Because just because you can convert something doesn't mean that it's going to work. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that. Now, once we've done the post-conversion smoke test, it really does give us the opportunity to say, I'm in great shape. I know that this application is in MSIX. I know I can take advantage of App Attach. I want to deploy it via Nerdio. Fine, export to Nerdio Manager for Enterprise. I want to move this to Windows 365 and deploy it as an Intune Win wrapped application through Intune. Fine, you have the ability to do that. But ultimately for us, we wanted to go through that entire process and allow folks to start making those decisions based on all the data that we're able to provide with the automation. So if I show you quickly in terms of the demo here, we can pop in to the console. Can everyone see that? I don't want to get too close to the speaker because it's already a little squeaky. But once we get into the console, you're now going to have the ability to pull the apps in from SCCM, and you'll see this onboarding dashboard where we've done the import, we've automated the discovery, and we've automated the baseline smoke test. And what you're able to do is you're able to come in and say, okay, for Acrobat Read or Test, for instance, let's see, we're not going to look at the app volumes package. Let's look at the Windows package first. Let's look at this one. Ugh. So if I come in here, what I'm able to see is all of the data associated with this particular installation, including the install commands, uninstall commands, and then the construct that I was talking about. You see in here we have full-on distiller, we've got acrobat.exe, we've got all of this data that, and dependencies, including the 7-zip in the way that it was actually packaged, and all of this is automatically extracted. And we've now discovered this application, and we understand how it's meant to behave. So if I come back in and look at Acrobat Reader, I can go through my baseline installation smoke test, and the thing I'll see is it installed without a problem, it's smoke tested without a problem, and I'm able to actually capture the outputs and the video and the performance of that smoke test. So now you can get 85 or 90% of the way there in your migration just by leveraging this automation pipeline and helping you start making those decisions. Now, if you decide that you want to take it one step further, you have the ability to come back in and say, great, I know that it works in Windows 11, but I want to take these applications that have been baseline and I want to ultimately take my onboarded apps and modernize them. And it's as simple as going through, picking the applications I want, clicking Convert to MSIX, pick them, click Go, and we're going to kick off the process. And those applications that are good candidates will be converted to MSIX and be ready to be exported into Intune. So that entire process, including conversion and post-conversion smoke test, is roughly an additional 20 minutes. So you're looking at 45 minutes end to end to get an application not only out of SCCM discovered, learned in terms of expected behavior, but also tested on your desired workspaces, determine if it's a good candidate for a modern format, and ultimately deliver it in that modern format by automating the capture, conversion, and post-conversion smoke test so that you can put it into Intune, so that you can put it into a WPM, so that you can take advantage of your new deployment and delivery methodology. Now, I know that we've got someone waiting on deck, so I don't know if we've got a couple of minutes for questions. I think we got 2 minutes maybe. 1 minute for questions. So are there any questions, or I'll be around. You can stop by the Rimo3 booth and I can give you a much more detailed demo. But any questions off the bat? No? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for taking time out of your lunch. I appreciate that.